بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين الكون الجامع الشامل والإنسان الكامل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Today we will commence in our study of the Ilahiyat from the Kitab al-Shifa, the Metaphysics of the Healing or the Cure by Ibn Sina. We will commence الفصل السادس من المقالة الأولى, or chapter 6. In the Marmura translation, he calls it chapter rather than section of book 1, or what I prefer to call discourse 1, al-Maqalat al-Ula. So this is spread over pages 29 to 34. Excuse me, pages 29 to 34 of the Marmura edition. And this maqala in the Marmura edition is divided into 13 paragraphs. That corresponds in the Cairo edition to pages 37 until 42. So of course it's larger pages. It's a larger book, so it's spread over less pages. All right. So that is what we will be studying today. And in case you are also following the classes on Tajreed al-I'tiqad, or if you are familiar with the Tajreed al-I'tiqad, the Summa Metaphysica et Theologica of Nasiruddin al-Tusi, and its commentary, the Kashf al-Murad, the Unveiling of the Intention by al-Allama al-Hilli, then there are some portions which are relevant to today's topic. And they are al-Mas'alatul Hadiyatu wal-Ishrun, or problem 21, as well as 22, and 23. All right, so that's 21, 22, and 23 from the Kashf al-Murad. And in the course of our class today on the Shifa, we will quite possibly, or in all likelihood, make brief reference to the Kashf al-Murad as well. So, what is really the essence of the 6th chapter, or the 6th section, al-Fasl al-Sadis? Well, if you go back, what was really the point of, or what was the essential point, the essence of chapter 5? In chapter 5, of course, there were a number of topics which were discussed. Does anyone remember? I made a list of 8 or 9 of these. All right. I made a list of 8, to which I think you could maybe add a 9th. One was the relationship between metaphysics, or to be more exact, ontology and logic. The second was how this relationship between metaphysics and logic, or ontology and logic, points to the fact that being or existence cannot be defined, and that axiomatically speaking it is a primitive or basic notion. Third, the concomitant character of being with thingness, or wujud with shay'iyya, and that whilst the two are not synonymous, they are coextensive. The fourth was the introduction of the notion of quiddity or mahiyya. And here is where we might have added the extra one, which wasn't in the original list, was al-wujud al-dhihni, or mental existence. Then what originally was 5 would become 6, that the non-existence al-ma'dum is not a shay, is not a thing, And then 6, which would now become 7, the rejection of intermediate ontological states. And then 7, which would now become 8, the indefinability of necessary, possible, contingent, and impossible. Focus on that. And then 8th, the last, or 9th, if we add al-wujud al-dhihni, the repudiation of the return or the coming back or bringing back into existence of the non-existent. Butlanu i'adatil ma'dum. So I said that we should keep in mind the indefinability of necessary, possible, and contingent. Necessary, possible, or what you could also call the contingent, and the impossible. In Arabic, al-wajib, which is in this context also referred to as al-daruri, and then al-mumkin, and then al-mumtani'. Okay? That is what we covered in al-fasl al-khamis. Now in al-fasl al-sadis, or section 6, it says في ابتداء القول في الواجب الوجود والممكن الوجود وأن الواجب الوجود لا علة له وأن الممكن الوجود معلول وأن الواجب الوجود غير مكافئ لغيره في الوجود ولا متعلق بغيره فيه. Here, especially where you see the term mukafi'. So in English, before I come to that, in English we've got on commencing, in the Marmura translation, I'm on page 29, on commencing a discourse on the necessary existent and the possible existent, that the necessary existent has no cause, that the possible existent is caused, that the necessary existent has no equivalent in existence and is not dependent in existence on another. So he is really now examining, in this section, the nature of wujub for wujud. Al-wajibul wujud, he calls it. And then he's also concerned with al-mumkin al-wujud. And the mumtani' doesn't show up in the title. But he is concerned with, in other words, necessity and contingency. Now, why are necessity and contingency important? They're important because they are fundamental ideas, fundamental concepts in Ibn Sina's demonstration for the existence of God. So when you see in the Arabic where he says أن الواجب الوجود غير مكافئ لغيره في الوجود, that the necessary existent has no equivalent in existence. ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. So it's as though the whole Surah Al-Ikhlas or Surah Al-Tawheed, which is the 112th Surah of the Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. Allah Samad means, of course, that Allah is utterly and completely self-sufficient, that He is not dependent in existence on another. ولا متعلق بغيره فيه, in the title here. So, the topics which are dealt with in chapter 6 as encapsulated in the title bring to mind, certainly in the mind of the Muslim reader, this very famous surah from the Quran. Now there is a tafsir of Surah Al-Ikhlas which is ascribed to Ibn Sina, which I saw many years ago. I do not know, however, if it is authentic. I have a photocopy of it somewhere. It was a lithograph published in India, which was graciously made available to me by my teacher, Maulana Tilmiz al-Hasnain Rizvi of Princeton, New Jersey. Perhaps I should ask him about it again, because I don't know where that photocopy ended up, but I'm certain he knows where his copy is. All right.
And its attribution term is questionable.
It may well be. I mean, one would have to. The most authoritative listing of all of this now, of course, is Gutas.
I wonder if Gutas mentions it.
And it depends on one could agree or disagree with Guterres' opinion. These are other topics and they're outside of our immediate concern, but I refer you to that work by Guterres. What's it called? Introduction to the Avicennian Tradition, or Introduction to Reading Avicenna, or something like that. It's a famous book.
Aristotle and the Avicennian Tradition.
No. That's not Guterres.
The other one.
That's his student Bartolacci. Moving along, he says, وَنَعُودُ إِلَى مَا كُنَّ فِيهِ فَنَقُولُ. We will now return to what we were discussing and say, إِنَّ لِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِنَ الْوَاجِبِ الْوُجُودِ وَالْمُمْكِنِ الْوُجُودِ خَوَاصٌ. Okay, this is paragraph 1, Arabic, page 29 in Marmura. And these are the last couple of lines on that page. So he says that there are specific properties that belong individually each to the necessary existent and the possible existent. So keep in mind that Ibn Sina made clear in the 5th fasl that the terms necessary, contingent, or necessity, contingency, and impossibility are like wujud, meaning they can't be defined. As was pointed out by Nasiruddin al-Tusi in the Tajrid al-I'tiqad wal-Bahthu fi ta'rifiha kal-wujudi, seeking to define them. In other words, the 3 ontological modes of necessity, impossibility, and contingency is like trying to define being. That's in the Tajrid al-I'tiqad, Kashf al-Murad, with the commentary Kashf al-Murad, Hassan Zada Amali edition, page 68. Al-Mas'alatu al-Thalitha. So I told you there is some overlap between these. So my question to you then, or what you should ask yourself is he now trying to define necessary existent and contingent existent? No. He's simply saying they have khawas. Because they can't really be, or at least the notions of necessity and contingency cannot be defined. So we try and look for some qualities, or what Marmura calls specific properties. That's how he renders khawas. Mm-hmm. So that's really what he's going to try and do here, but in this chapter. But you must keep in mind, or at the back of your mind constantly, that the ultimate metaphysical goal here is to establish the existence of God. This is all toward that end. In other words, to come up with a burhan, an argument which rises to the level of apodictic proof for the existence of God. So he continues in paragraph 1 saying that the things that enter existence bear a possible twofold division in the mind. Very important. إن الأمور التي تدخل في الوجود تحتمل أو تحتمل في العقل الانقسام إلى قسمين. On the next page. Now that goes to page 30. Among them there will be that which, when considered in itself, its existence would not be necessary. You have to read very carefully. All right, so he says that there's 2 kinds. There's a twofold division of things which can exist in the mind, right? Things that enter into existence. Al-umur allati tadkhulu fi al-wujud. There are 2 of those kinds. 2 kinds of those things, Among them there will be that which, when considered in itself, its existence would not be necessary. فَيَكُونُ مِنْهَا مَا إِذَا اعْتُبِرَ بِذَاتِهِ لَمْ يَجِبْ وُجُودُهُ وظاهر أنه لا يمتنع أيضا وجوده. Excuse me. It is moreover clear that its existence would also not be impossible, since otherwise it would not enter existence. وهذا الشيء هو وإلا لم يدخل في الوجود وهذا الشيء هو في حيز الإمكان. This thing is within the bound of possibility. ويكون منها ما إذا اعتبر بذاته وَجَبَ وُجُودُهُ. There will also be among them that which, when considered in itself, its existence would be necessary. So he says that if you consider those things which come under the heading excuse me, of things that exist, الأمور التي تدخل في الوجود, that you've got two possibilities. Either that thing may or may not exist, or that thing must exist. Now, if that necessity, if it necessarily exists, and its necessity is in and of itself, then that is God, and you are done, so to speak. But if it's not, then you have a case of so-called contingent being, and it exists because we're talking about things that actually enter into existence, but it need not have existed. It exists because there is, at the very least, some agent cause, or al-fa'il in Arabic, or al-illatul al-fi'liya, or al-fa'ila, or they have different ways of expressing that. What's called in English philosophical terminology, the efficient cause, an idea which goes back to Aristotle. And when that efficient cause is present, then that thing necessarily comes into existence. But it is what we call in Arabic wajibun bil ghayr. It is mumkin al wujud, but it is wajibun bil ghayr. Wajibun bil ghayr means that it's necessary through another. In other words, its coming into existence depends upon another. And the idea here is that we must avoid an infinite regress. And to avoid that infinite regress is impossible. And so you will inevitably come up with a chain of contingencies, or a network of contingencies. And that chain of contingencies, or network of contingencies, of interlocking causes, cannot sustain itself, and is therefore dependent upon an ultimate cause, and that cause is God. And again, to refer to the to the Tajrid al-I'tiqad, let's see, where is this? This should be in المقصد الثالث في إثبات الصانع تعالى وصفاته وآثاره. The third section, or maqsad, the third goal, the third investigation of the Tajrid al-I'tiqad in the Hassan Zad Amli edition. It's opposite page 390, so page 391, but there's no page number there on 391. So the third investigation, considering establishing the existence of the Creator and His attributes and His acts. And so the first fasl is al-awwal fi wujudihi ta'ala. That's on page, what is this, 392. There, Nasiruddin Atusi says, al-wujudu in kana wajiban wa illa istalzamuhu listihalat ad-dawr wa tasalsul. That's it. He says, al-mawjud in kana wajiban. If you have some existing thing and it is necessary, then you are done. Otherwise, so in other words, he says, al-mawjud in kana. So if you have an existing thing, if it is necessary, or if it's not, then this would imply or lead to a vicious circle or an infinite regress. It's a very short, sort of telegraphic language in which he's saying that if you look at the entire cosmos, if you look around at actually existing things, then those things are necessarily contingent, and the entire cosmos in its aggregate is contingent, because it is a network of causes. Now, mind and that network of causes cannot sustain itself, and so There has to be a necessary being. That's where this is actually going. All right. So if we now go to the second paragraph, he says, we thus say, in the English, paragraph 2, page 30, Marmura edition, we thus say that which in itself is a necessary existent has no cause. So this is the most significant specific property of the necessary existent, al-wajib al-wujud bi-dhatihi, la illata lahu. That which in itself is a necessary existence. He doesn't say al-wajib al-ghayr. He says, inna al-wajiba al-wujuda bi-dhatihi, la illata lahu. And then he says, وَإِنَّ الْمُمْكِنَ الْوُجُودَ بِذَاتِهِ لَهُ عِلَّةٌ. While that which in itself is a possible existent has a cause. So he just elaborates upon this here. It's pretty simple, but later on the language gets very involved, but so far so good. In paragraph 2, he just goes on and elaborates. He says, whatever is a necessary existent in itself is a necessary existent in all its aspects. من جميع الجهات أو من جميع جهاته. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from all of his aspects, in all senses, is necessarily existent. وَإِنَّ الْوَاجِبَ الْوُجُودَ لَا يُمْكِنْ أَنْ يَكُونَ وُجُودُهُ مُكَافِئًا لِوُجُودٍ آخَرٍ. The existence of the necessary existent cannot be equivalent to the existence of another, where each would equal the other as regards necessary existence, becoming thereby necessary concomitants. فيكون كل واحد منهما مساويا للآخر في وجوب الوجود ويتلازمان. Is that clear to you, Bilal? You are shaking your head.
No, it's clear, but
But what?
huh?
But what?
No, it's interesting that he mentions this doctrine about how existence, a form of tashkik, almost in existence.
Where's the tashkik here?
Or in the sense that, the existence of wajib al-wujud can't be compared to mumkin al-wujud. Mm-hmm. Or is that going too far of a stretch and bringing, later doctrines in?
It's not a question of being comparable, is it? It's not comparability, it's equivalence.
Okay.
At-takafu is equivalency. Mm. So there is no equivalence. Allah has no peer, we would say, in English.
In equivalence, it says in regard to the cause, I think, right?
Because there is no equivalence between necessary being and any other being in terms of necessity bidatihi, in its essence.
Right.
In other words, there is no common measure between the necessity of the necessarily existent and the necessity of the contingently existent, because the contingently existent is necessary only to the extent that it is necessary through some agent cause. And there is no common measure between the two.
So when the possible being become wajibul wujud bil ghayrihi, then it's not sharing the wujud, at least between the two.
It's not an equivalence.
I'm not talking about the equivalence, but it's sharing at that time, because it's wujud bil ghayrihi and it's wujud bizatihi. Mm-hmm. So at least the wujud is what he mentioned, is like maybe because the wujud is common between the two.
Commonality does not imply equivalence.
No, but we can say that, or not.
You can, right? Yeah.
But that does not mean tashkik in that regard.
There is tashkik. There is tashkik in that regard, yeah. But in the masha'i sense of tashkik,
yeah, it's there.
In the masha'i sense of tashkik, it just means that the term wujud is used analogically, but in the hikmat al-muta'aliya sense of tashkik, it's different. You must keep the two. You've got to keep the two clear in your mind, and that's one of the reasons among many. I think that it's still worth studying Ibn Sina. Very few people philosophize in a vacuum, and Mullah Sadra is very late in the day, so to speak, in the history of Islam. That in no way detracts from his originality. But how can you appreciate his originality if you don't know what came before? So if you neglect the study of Ibn Sina, or for that matter, neglect those portions of the Tajrid al-I'tiqad which are a summation of the metaphysics of the Abyssinian school, of the peripatetic school, you have missed a great deal in terms of the intellectual history of Islam, and that's just a shame. All right, so those were good questions. Let's see if there's anything further we need to focus on in the second paragraph. He's just elaborating on this idea. So there is no equivalence, right? Then he continues, I'm on line 10, 11, 12, 13. Line 13, page 30, the English. The existence of the necessary existent cannot at all be a composite deriving from multiplicity. So this is another thing he's added. He says in Arabic, وأن الواجب الوجود لا يجوز أن يجتمع وجوده عن كثرة البتة. Okay, so the existence of the necessary existent cannot at all be a composite. It is utterly simple. It is basita. So it has, no degree of tarkib or composition in it. You can have various kinds of tarkib. So, for example, Abdul Rasul Ubudiyat mentions 8 kinds of tarkib, where he mentions 8 kinds of tarkib in his book on Mullah Sadra, Al-Nizam al-Falsafi, but I'm using the Arabic edition. It's in volume 2 or 3. Sorry, I don't have the page number here. I've just made some notes. Yeah, there's 8. If you are really interested in the exact citation, I mean, you should be. I'm sorry, I have an incomplete set of notes here when I wrote this down. Actually, I mentioned this in my lecture in Cambridge some weeks ago. I will find the exact reference and post it on our Telegram group. But these 8 forms of tarkib, according to Abdul Rasul Ubudiyat, the first tarkib, and this is kind of modern, I think. Like the first one, he says, at-tarkib al-kimiyai. And he gives the chemical compositeness or composition, where of course in the modern theory of chemistry you have the notion that you have 92 naturally occurring elements, and these combine in the form of of molecules that result in various compounds, hence the term compound. All right, fine, that's a modern notion, and it's a useful one. I don't know that Mullah Sadra would have had that. I mean, for people like Mullah Sadra, there were only 4 elements, and they combined in various ways. But anyhow, it's one he lists. The second one is more traditional. The rest of them are all very traditional. Tarkib al-madda wa sura al-kharijiyatan. In other words, the composition of matter and form when talking about an object that has al-wujud al-ayni al-khariji, when talking about an actually existing object in the external world, we can speak of its matter and form and the composite of matter and form. Although we cannot separate them in the external world, we can on a mental level understand that this bottle, for example, has matter and form.
And it's tarkib al-madda wa sura al-kharijiyan?
No, it has to be al-kharijiyatan.
Al-kharijiyatan.
Then tarkib al-madda wa sura al-dhahniyatan. So you can have the composite of matter and form for something which is only mental, or a mental concept which is extracted from an externally existing thing. That was the third. Then the fourth is tarkib al-jawhar wal-arad. Of course, you can speak of substances, right? And a substance has any number of accidents.
Can you repeat the third one again?
تركيب المادة والصورة الذهنيتان. Okay, so, and the fourth is the composition of jawhar and arad, or of substance and accident. The fifth would be تركيب الجنس والفصل, the composition of genus and species. Okay, I think so far those are clear. The sixth one may not be immediately obvious to you, just by the mention of its designation, but the designation or the name is تركيب الأجزاء المقدارية. So the composition of things which are subject to quantity or measure in some respect. And that could even be imaginary. I mean, you could split this. That could be purely mental. It could be, the notion that, you could just take, let's take a simple thing. I mean, if I give you, what's something that we could naturally chop up? I mean, like a cucumber.
Right.
It has miqdar. It has some sort of extensions. It has some sort of, and you could chop that up into I don't know how many slices, right? And then, on an imaginary level, you can infinitely divide a line, right? So it's composed of these ajza. That's what it means by ajza, parts. And there was this ancient kalam notion of something called al-juz alladhi la yatajazza, or the indivisible part, or the indivisible atom, some ultimate unit of things. At any rate, that's the sixth form of tarkib. The seventh, according to Abdul Rasul Abu Did, is tarkib al-wujud wal-adam. And finally, there is the tarkib of al-wujud wal-mahiyya. So the seventh would be the composition of existence and non-existence. And the eighth would be composition of being and quiddity. Okay?
And what was the Arabic title of the title of translation?
النظام الفلسفي.
Not translated yet, right? In Arabic and Farsi.
النظام الفلسفي لمدرسة الحكمة المتعالية. So I found it. It's these 8 forms of tarkib are in volume 3. The Arabic translation of النظام الفلسفي لمدرسة الحكمة المتعالية is in 3 parts, translated by someone named Ali al-Musawi, published by مركز الحضارة لتنمية الفكر الإسلامي, Beirut.
That's 3 volumes total.
Yeah. So this is volume 3, pages 150 to 151, so I don't have to post it now.
Volume 3?
Yeah, page 150 to 151. And he actually goes through and explains these different kinds of things, because this is in his section where he wants to talk about al-basata, about the divine simplicity. All right. So he says that Ibn Sina now says that there is no composition in the necessary existent. The necessary existent is utterly simple. The true nature of the necessary existent can in no manner, be shared by another. That's lines 14 to 15 of the English. وأن الواجب الوجود لا يجوز أن تكون الحقيقة التي له مشتركا فيها بوجه من الوجوه. The true nature, its haqiqah, the true nature of necessary being, the necessary existent, can in no manner be shared by another. From our verifying all this, it follows necessarily that the necessary existent is not dependent on relation, is neither changing nor multiple, and has nothing associated with his existence that is proper to himself. Okay. That may not be clear to you. He says, in Arabic, he says what له مشترك وجه من الوجوه حتى يلزم من تصحيحنا ذلك أن يكون واجب الوجود غير مضاف ولا متغير ولا متكثر ولا مشارك في وجوده الذي يخصه. تمام. So let's look at these one by one. If we don't finish the whole of chapter 6, that's also fine, but we have to do this right. Let's so he says the true nature of the necessary existent can in no manner be shared by another. So he's saying that the necessary existent is utterly unique. He goes further and says, from our verifying all this, it follows necessarily that the necessary existent is not dependent on relation. Here it says that in Arabic, غير مضاف is neither changing nor multiple. لا متغير ولا متكثر ولا مشارك. So what do we understand by that? That's the question now. First of all, do you understand what it means for when we say that Allah is utterly simple? There's no composition. You don't understand that.
Whether physical or mental.
There's one composition which I don't think Abdul Rasul Ubudiyat mentions here. That's why I said it's according to him. I just, wanted to refer to an authority rather than quoting myself. But there's one here which he doesn't exactly mention. And that is the composition between al-quwwa wal-fi'l, between potency and act. He sort of includes it under al-ajza' al-miqdariyya, because something is potentially divisible. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is utterly simple. He has no composition. He doesn't have parts. He has no parts whatsoever. He can't be reduced to a combination of potency and act. Whereas if we talk about contingent being, potency and act is a complete division of being, as the scholastic philosophers would say. In other words, the notion of al-quwwa wal-fi'l completely describes contingent being. That every contingent object is some murakkab, some composite of potency and act. There are certain potencies or latencies which are not actualized and may be actualized given the right causes and conditions, right?
So what about the active intellect? Is it what is beyond al-quwa bil-fail, or it is what pure aql bil-fail, or it is what the God is all about?
Well, God is not the active intellect. The active intellect is interpreted differently by many people. And it is it goes back to a passage in Aristotle, which is probably the most controversial or the most ambiguous and therefore the most debated in terms of its interpretation passage in all of Aristotle. And there's a famous book on that, and there's a lot that's been said, and you should probably refer to that. I think it's by Davidson, isn't it? Do you have it?
The one that Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina and
Averroes, that's a famous study.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
So I would I would refer you to that.
Okay.
Okay, but so is that more clear to you now what is meant by simplicity?
So when it comes to attributes to God, it is also not the parts of it, it is in his essence then. Bizatihi, the sifat.
Even his essence cannot be said to be composite, even though there are these attributes, that those attributes represent a particular haythiyya or aspect under which the essence may be thought of.
Okay, thought of.
Yeah. One could think of it in the sense of a kind of nuqta or dot, which is at the center of a circle or a sphere. And that center of the sphere or center of the circle determines all of the possibilities on the circumference.
Mhm.
But it is not actually there, and it is not itself ever multiplied. Do you understand?
Mhm.
Yet it determines every point on the circumference. Because in geometry, a circle is the locus of points in a plane that is equidistant from a fixed point.
Right.
So without that center, there's nothing. If you remove the center, so to speak, the circle collapses.
There's no circle then.
العلم نقطة كثرها الجاهلون. So all of knowledge is nothing but a simple dot or a point, so to speak, which has been multiplied and ramified by the ignorant.
What does this term mean when Ibn Sina says غير مضاف in this context to God? It just means he's not composite.
Yeah.
There's nothing added to him.
Since we've all studied Islamic law here, what kind of water is not suitable for ritual purification? Al-ma'ul mudaf. Aab-e mudaf jo hai, wo taharat ke liye nahi istemal kiya jata hai. So what is aab-e mudaf if we use the Persian Urdu, or al-ma'ul
mudaf?
Yeah, what does that mean? That means something has been added to it. So ma al-batikh, the water which comes from a watermelon, or something whose three attributes have changed, of the attributes of fragrance, color, or taste, right, have been changed, right? So what does that mean? It means that something has been added. So there is no addition. Similarly, like you are, for example, Bilal, you have a ring. So anta sahabul khatam. You are dhu khatam. That's a composition. That's an idafa. There's something related to you by some relation. You know, you're wearing this ring, it belongs to you, it's your property. But it implies this kind of composition. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has nothing added to him. That's what it means.
And of course, compositions could be of different types. Like, for example, when you say al-izzatu lillahi,
yes,
Allahu sahibul izzah or dhul izzah.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably a different composition than me being sahibul khatam.
Exactly. It's not the same thing. So much for that, for composition. What was the other one? Yeah, and he doesn't undergo change, you see, because change implies that he's subject to time. It implies that he is a potency that is undergoing actualization. That's change. And then there's no multiplicity. He's not mutakathir. So there is nothing associated with him. He has no sharik which is proper to himself. He has no sharik or musharik, nothing associated with his existence that is proper to himself. Okay. Now he's sort of in chapter 3, in paragraph 3, he's sort of getting to this idea of this chain of causes. So in paragraph 3, he says that the necessary existent has no cause is obvious. أما أن الواجب الوجود لا علة له فظاهر لأنه إن كان الواجب الوجود علة في وجوده كان وجوده بها وكل ما وجوده بشيء فإذا اعتبر بذاته دون غيره لم يجب له وجود وكل ما إذا اعتبر بذاته دون غيره ولم يجب له وجود فليس واجب الوجود بذاته. So that's a whole argument he's making. He says that the necessary existent has no cause is obvious. Now he tries to defend this. He tries to establish this. For, in other words, because if in his existence the necessary existent were to have a cause, his existence would be by that cause. But whatever exists by something else, بالغير, in other words, does he have بالغير?
دون غيره.
دون غيره, yeah. But whatever exists by something else, if considered in itself, apart from another, existence for it would not be necessary. And everything for which existence is not found to be necessary, if the thing is considered in itself, apart from another, is not a necessary existent in itself. It's very wordy, but he simply, yeah. In all honesty, the proof for the existence of God, which Ibn Sina has, on the basis of necessity and contingency, and the same proof or the same demonstration which Nasiruddin al-Tusi cites in the Tajrid al-I'tiqad, I've written that in a more modern form, and I don't know if you guys have that. I think that Sayyid Bilal has a copy. Do you have a copy, Tahniyat?
For Tajrid?
No, this proof of the existence of God, which I wrote out.
I have my full notes on it sitting here as well.
Okay, because
No, I don't have it.
I think I sent it to you after my presentation on this topic.
I can send it to you. It's in the introduction to the Tajrid.
Okay.
I have the recording of introduction to the Tajrid though.
The PDF.
Oh, I don't have the PDF. Yeah, then I need it.
Okay, I'll email that to you. I can just put it on the group. I have to find the good version because there were some typos. Maybe I've corrected them since then. Anyway, I will take care of that. So here he is trying to establish that the necessary existent is acausal. All right, the necessary existent is acausal, is not subject to having a cause, is outside of that causal nexus. It's not subject to. Now it's interesting here. He doesn't get into this here, but then the necessary existent, since the necessary existent is not caused, but the necessary existent is the cause of everything else. Ultimately. So that means to say that the necessary existent is ultimately the cause of everything else means that the necessary existent is the ultimate efficient cause.
Right.
Yet everything is tending towards God, so he is also at the same time the end. In other words, he is also at the same time the final cause. So there is a reciprocity, if that is the right word. Is that the right word?
Reciprocal nature.
Yeah, there
Where you come from, you have to go.
Yeah, so the efficient and the God is simultaneously the efficient and the final cause. And so there is a relationship, maybe reciprocal is the right word, between them. It is thus evident that if what is in itself a necessary existent were to have a cause, it would not be in itself a necessary existent. It would contradict its very nature. Thus it becomes clear that the necessary existent has no cause. From this, it is also clear that it is impossible for a thing to be both a necessary existent in itself and a necessary existent through another.
Mm-hmm.
So although we cannot really come up with a definition of necessity and contingency, we can still see their khawas and see that the absolutely necessary excludes by its khawas the absolutely contingent. They exclude one another.
Right.
They are mutually exclusive. Okay. Thus it becomes clear that the necessary existent has no cause. From this it is also clear that it is impossible for a thing to be both necessary existent in itself. This is because If its existence is rendered necessary through another, it cannot exist without the other. But if anything whatsoever cannot exist without another, its existence as necessary in itself is impossible. For if it were necessary in itself, then it would have to come into existence, there being no influence on its existence by way of necessity from that which is other and which affects the existence of something else. But since such an influence has been supposed, its existence would not be necessary in itself. All of this is simply to establish the following proposition. The proposition is that the necessary existent has no cause. Now, it's useful as an exercise to read through paragraph 3 again, maybe as a homework assignment. Read through it and write it in your own words. When you put something in your own words, you end up personalizing it and owning it. You then come, you establish some sort of ownership, shall we say, of the doctrine or the teaching or the idea there. Yeah, I don't know if we'll be able to finish this. We'll go maybe halfway through. Maybe there's 13 paragraphs here. We can probably go to paragraph 6, and then I think we'll stop. Okay? There are 13. They're long paragraphs, not like the last one. So what is paragraph 4? Well, it starts with moreover, or in Arabic, وأيضا. وأيضا أن كل ما هو ممكن الوجود باعتبار ذاته فوجوده وعدمه كلاهما بعلة. Moreover, whatever is possible in existence, or if you prefer, whatever is contingent in existence, when considered in itself, باعتبار ذاته, its existence and its non-existence, its wujud and its adam, are both due to a cause. Naam. Nothing, no question. Okay. This is because if it comes into existence, then existence as distinct from non-existence would have occurred to it. Similarly, if it ceases to exist, then non-existence as distinct from existence would have occurred to it. That's pretty clear. Hence, in each of the two cases, in other words, existing or non-existing, what occurs to the thing must either occur through another or not. If it occurs through another, then this other is the cause, and if it did not exist through another, then the non-existence of the other is the cause of its non-existence. You see how he's moving toward a proof, moving toward a demonstration, an apodictic proof. He's saying that, well, if something is contingent, then it either can exist or it not exist. And if it does exist, it exists through another. And then that same analysis applies to that other thing. And so on and so on and so on until you realize that you cannot come to infinite regress. Yes?
So for the possible existence, it need to come into existence first and then non-existence fine, or it can be
No, he's just giving an example. He's just giving an example.
Okay.
For example, you could build a birdhouse. It's come into existence because you had the wood, the nails, the glue, whatever, right? So the material causes are there. The efficient cause is there. The guy who's building it, the carpenter. The formal cause is there. It takes on the form of a birdhouse. It's there for birds to live in. That's the final cause. And then you make it and you say, this is a lousy birdhouse. And you throw some gasoline on it and set it on fire. Well, khalas, now it doesn't exist, right? So it came into existence. It went out of existence.
Can we, logically speaking, not semantically or in words, say that there is a cause for something's non-existence? Or there would be no cause. Like, for example, we're saying mumkin al-wujud, that there is an illah that brings it into existence, then it's there. But if that cause is not present, can we say because of this cause not being present,
your cause of not crashing the car is that you follow the rules of traffic, right? Or that's one example. I don't know. So yes, you can speak of.
But would it be considered a cause in the Aristotelian sense?
Well, that's a good question.
Like, for example,
Yeah, you're the efficient cause of its non-existence.
We can say that.
I don't see why not.
Which we already exist though.
I don't see why not.
Because the non-existence cannot exist because there is no such thing as non-existent. So something needs to be exist. Then the cause can be.
Let me put it this way: there are conditions for something not happening, right?
Right.
That's all. Number 5, paragraph 5, page 31. In the English, it's line 10. In the Arabic, it's page 31, line 5. ومن البين أن كل ما لم يوجد ثم وجد فقد تخصص بأمر جائز غير بأمر جائز other than it. Hence, it is clear that whatever exists after non-existence has been specified with something possible other than itself. Right? The case is the same with non-existence. وكذلك في العدم وذلك لأن هذا التخصيص إما أن تكفي فيه ماهية الأمر أو لا تكفي فيه ماهية. فإن كانت ماهيته تكفي لأي الأمرين كان حتى يكون حاصلا فيكون, if we take that as فاء السببية, فيكون ذلك الأمر واجب الماهية لذاته. What's the English? Hence, it is clear that whatever exists after non-existence has been specified with something possible other than itself. Okay. It is clear that whatever exists after non-existence has been specified with something possible other than itself. We gave the example of constructing some wooden structure, a birdhouse, I think it was. The case is the same with non-existence. This is because the thing's quiddity is either sufficient for this specification or not. If its quiddity is sufficient for either of the two states of affairs, wujud and adam, existence or non-existence, to obtain, then that thing would be in itself of a necessary quiddity. When the thing has been supposed not to be necessary in itself, and this is contradictory. If, on the other hand, the existence of its quiddity is not sufficient for specifying the possible of its existence, the latter being rather something whose existence is added to it, then its existence would be necessarily due to some other thing. This then would be its cause. Hence it has a cause. Okay, this is all very wordy. What's the conclusion? In sum, then, either of the two things, existence or non-existence, wujud or adam, would obtain necessarily for the possible that was due not to itself but to a cause. The existential idea would be realized through a cause, namely an existential cause, and the non-existential idea would be realized through a cause, namely the absence of the former existential idea as you have known. So he is just explaining further what it means for something to exist having once not existed. ومن البين أن كل ما لم يوجد ثم وجد فقد تخصص بأمر جائز غيره وكذلك في العدم وذلك لأن هذا التخصيص إما أن تكفي فيه ماهية الأمر أو لا تكفي فيه ماهية. That's all he's explaining. He's explaining, what it means for something to come into existence having not existed, or having gone into non-existence having existed. So in the case
Could you explain this
of the
mahiyya?
Yeah, this is so in the Arabic. Where is that? What line is it? 5, 6, 7, 8. فيكون ذلك الأمر واجب الماهية لذاته. Okay, so here he's saying that if a thing's quiddity. Okay, first of all, you have to understand, what is he trying to say in paragraph 5? He's talking about what happens when you have something that exists having not existed before. You build something, or something goes out of existence having existed before. You being destroyed, dying, what have you. Okay, what is happening here? In both cases, it's because you have a quiddity. The quiddity of the birdhouse, the quiddity of whatever we're talking about, the quiddity of X. Quiddity of something, and that quiddity is either sufficient, it's kafi, takfi fihi, or la takfi fihi. So it's either sufficient or it's not. If the quiddity is sufficient for either of the two states of affairs, then that thing would be in itself a necessary quiddity. But you can't have that. That's a contradiction.
Yeah, that was thinking too.
Because we're saying that the thing is contingent. It can either exist or not exist. To obtain then that thing would be in itself of a necessary quiddity when the thing has been supposed to be necessary in itself, and this is contradictory. If, on the other hand, the existence of its quiddity is not sufficient for specifying the possible, the latter being rather something whose existence is added to it, then its existence would be necessarily due to some other thing. This then would be its cause, hence it has a cause. In sum, then either of the two things, existence or non-existence, would obtain necessarily for the possible that was due not to itself but to a cause. The existential idea, what does he have here for existence? أما المعنى الوجودي فبعلة هي علة وجودية. The existential idea would be realized through a cause. And the non-existential idea وأما المعنى العدمي فبعلة هي عدم العلة للمعنى الوجودي وعلى ما علمت. बहुत ही ज़्यादा घुमा फिरा के वो बता रहे हैं कि he's going around, is somewhat well, is it really, he's not really talking in circles, but Ibn Sina was not well known for is not famous for being the most clear in expression. Sometimes he is, but other times he's famous, he's infamously or famously not. Do you have something to offer the discussion?
I mean, would it be accurate to say that he's just trying to say that existence is not part of the mahi of mumkin and existence is part of the mahi of wajib?
Yeah. Very well. Very well.
But I don't even understand the point of wajibul mahia. I don't. What exactly is wajibul mahia is?
If something had to exist, then it's by its very nature, it has to exist.
Like God is existence.
Mahia in the general sense.
Okay.
Yeah, you've got to.
Yeah, I'm just like.
I think 4:00 is a little late in the day. So if we had been able to, I understand stuff happens, but if we had met maybe a little bit earlier, maybe your caffeine would be still working a bit more. I don't know.
No, but this one is like, no, it makes
the fact is
sense,
we do get tired.
Like...
Yeah, no, it's true. You've got to be very alert when doing this. That's why I said it's a useful. It's a useful. Exercise or useful mode of reading or studying Ibn Sina as you read it a few times and then try and put it in your own words, even if it's just the English. I mean,
So can you summarize this again? The 5 and just...
No, I'm getting tired. Summarize it again. Okay. So, in terms of of contingency and necessity. Necessity, by its nature, by its quiddity in the general sense, must exist.
Okay.
But contingency, by its very nature, quiddity in the general sense, may exist or not exist. In other words, it need not exist.
Okay.
And its existence is subject to causes and conditions. That's all he's saying.
So why is like so difficult to...
Well,
Because I'm going to wajibul mahia.
Well, then he's further saying the sum. You have to look at the sum as well. In sum, so either of the two things, whether something exists or not exists, come about necessarily, due not to not in and of themselves, but through some sort of cause, right? So the non-existence also has a cause, and that is, as he says, al-ma'na al-wujudi fabi'illatin and al-ma'na al-admi fabi'illatin. Okay?
To answer our previous question.
To answer our previous question, which we brought up. Do you want to do one more paragraph, or should we stop?
No, we can do one more.
We'll do one more, I think, and then that would be a good place. So we've got another page, not another page. We're going to read this paragraph, which continues over to the next page. So paragraph 6, which is line 27 in the English, and line 13 in the Arabic. So this is a kind of a conclusion. He says, we thus say, فَنَقُولُ, the possible in itself must become necessary through a cause and with respect to it. فنقول إنه يجب أن يصير واجبا بالعلة or بالغير In other words, that which is possible or contingent acquires some measure, as it were, of necessity only through an efficient cause external to it. Tamam? For if it were not necessary, then with the existence of the cause and with respect to it, it would still be possible. فإنه إن لم يكن واجبا كان عند وجود العلة بالقياس إليها ممكنا أيضا. It would then be possible for it to exist or not to exist. فكان يجوز أن يوجد وأن لا يوجد غير متخصص بأحد الأمرين. It would then be possible for it to exist or not to exist, being specified with neither of the two states. Once again, from the beginning, this would be in need of the existence of a third thing through which either existence as distinct from non-existence or non-existence as distinct from existence would be assigned for the possible when the cause of its existence with this state of affairs would not have been specified. وهذا محتاج من رأس إلى وجود شيء ثالث يتعين له بالوجود عن العدم. In other words, if you have something which is contingent, it becomes necessary only through some efficient cause external to it. And if that relative necessity did not obtain, then you have a problem, because then it would no longer be necessitated.
It would be mumtani al-wujud.
Well, it could either exist or not exist, as he said. So it's in this. It's just out there. It either exists or not exists. In other words, it's not specified by either of the two states, as he says.
Okay, so one question.
And then this would imply then that you would need some third thing for then it to come out of existence. So, in other words, what he is trying to do is he is trying, because the necessity and contingency or possibility and impossibility cannot be defined without leading to a vicious circle, but their characteristics can be delineated. And this is what he is attempting to do. And the reason that the language is so difficult or spread thin is because these things can't be defined, I think. But he is doing his best to delineate the characteristics right here so far of necessity and contingency, and what it means for something which is contingent for it to exist. In other words, that it becomes necessary through an efficient cause external to it.
So for the possible existence, you need a cause which is external to it. For the necessary existence, there is no cause for
external.
So the cause for the possible, it's a third thing, and then the necessary existence is another thing then.
It's not necessarily a third. It's just for any contingent thing, it becomes, if it's actually existing in the external world, it becomes necessary through another, through the causal action of a thing external to
everything is necessary. Shay'un lam yajid lam yujad.
So the relationship between the necessary and the possible, that's the cause. Is that cause is in the necessary being?
Yes, that too is necessary. The relationship between a contingent that actually exists and necessity on that lower level of causality is itself necessary.
That's what it is. So it's external to the possible one, but for the cause of it, it's in that the necessary one.
That sounds right. Yes. Okay. Well, these are serious things. You have to think about them very carefully. Okay, so where did we get to? This would be another cause. So once again from the beginning, this would be in need of the existence of a third through which either existence as distinct from non-existence or non-existence would be assigned, then the cause of its existence would not have been specified. So he's saying that this would ultimately lead to another cause. This would be another cause, and the discussion would extend to an infinite regress. فَيَكُونُ ذَلِكَ علة أخرى, and what is this? This is يتمادى. Yeah, I think it's يتمادى الكلام إلى غير النهاية. And then he says,
Extend.
if it regresses infinitely, the existence of the possible with all this would not have been specified by it. As such, its existence would not have been realized. This is impossible, not only because this leads to an infinity of causes, for this is a dimension. This is a weird, the impossibility of which is still open to doubt in its place, but because no dimension has been arrived at through which its existence is specified when it has been supposed to be existing. Hence it has been shown to be true that whatever is possible in its existence does not exist unless rendered necessary with respect to its cause. That's the key, and I'll explain this further. He says, hence, فَقَدْ صَحَّ أَنَّ كُلَّ مَا هُوَ مُمْكِنُ الْوُجُودِ لَا يُوجَدْ مَا لَمْ يَجِبْ بِالْقِيَاسِ إِلَى عِلَّتِهِ. So whatever is possible in its existence does not actually exist unless rendered necessary with respect to its cause. Now, what he is saying is that it's not only because we want to avoid an infinite regress, but because لم يوجد بعد ما به يتخصص وقد فرض موجودا. Because no dimension has been arrived at through which its existence is specified when it has been supposed to be existing. That's a weird way of saying it. No dimension has been arrived at. In other words, he's saying that if you say that something exists, this bookmark exists, as long as it's supposed to be existing, you must say that there is some cause for it.
So its existence does not automatically make sense that there is a cause, that's why it exists?
No, it's saying that you cannot conceive of any contingent thing without reference to its cause. And that you want to avoid an infinite regress. And so that leads you to the fact that any chain of causes, has to terminate somewhere. But he is allowing for the possibility, which is interesting. He says he's allowing for the possibility of an infinite causal chain or an infinite nexus. As he says here, فَإِنَّ هَذَا فِي هَذَا الْمَوْضِعِ بُعْدٌ مَشْكُوكٌ فِي إِحَالَتِهِ. And he vowels it as bu'dun. It could be just read فَإِنَّ هَذَا فِي هَذَا الْمَوْضِعِ بَعْد مَشْكُوكٌ فِي إِحَالَتِهِ. That this is still something which could be doubted. In other words, he says that, even if you don't accept, he's not saying whether he accepts or not. He's just saying that, okay, it's possible. If you don't want to accept the impossibility of an infinite regress, this is a very important point. He's saying that even if you do not admit the impossibility of infinite regress, you are still stuck. Why? Because, okay, let's say mentally you can conceive of an infinite causal chain, or an infinite network, a web of infinite causes. What is sustaining it?
There must be a cause.
So even if you say that it goes to infinity, that infinite causal chain or infinite network still needs to be rooted in some...
The chain itself becomes contingent.
Exactly. Because whether you have a finite chain of contingencies or an infinite chain of contingencies, it is still contingent. So, whether you have, silsilatul, mumkinat. If you have a silsilatul mumkinat, سواء كانت السلسلة متناهية أو غير متناهية، فإنها ممكن الوجود بما هو ممكن أو من حيث هو ممكن. In terms of whether you have a finite or infinite chain of contingencies, it is still, by its very nature, contingent in aggregate. And so it cannot sustain itself. That's a very important point. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
I sense a question is forming, or no?
No, it is. It makes sense.
It makes sense.
I'm just trying to figure it out, that how can a mumkin al-wujud conceive the cause from the necessary being, like necessary wujud? Because if it's like all the causes are the contingent cause, but there's one cause which is necessary for the necessary to become the first mumkin al-wujud. Because that mumkin al-wujud, the first mumkin al-wujud, comes from the necessary one, is the one that was, and from that up till now, all the ones are contingent. But there is one contingent being that is, the cause is necessary from the necessary being, isn't it?
Are you talking about the very first thing to be made? As-sadr al-awwal, the first thing to be emanated, the first thing to be created. Is it the aql? Is it the intellect? Is it the pen?
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah.
Because the first thing supposed to have the two sides of a coin, that it can give you, it attached to the necessary one, but then it attached to the mumkin one as well too.
Yeah. Okay, the short answer, the short gloss on this is that to my knowledge, the great Urafa, the people who have attained to kashf, to some kind of mystical unveiling, and who have studied the relevant texts, they all claim, to my knowledge, that the first thing to be created is sometimes spoken of as the aql, sometimes spoken of as the pen, or so sometimes spoken as the intelligence or the intellect, sometimes it's the pen, and other times they talk about al-haqiqat al-Muhammadiyya, the Muhammadan reality, and other times they talk about an-nur al-Muhammadi, or the Muhammadan light. And Allah knows best.
Because there is something that has the capacity for accept the cause from the necessary, but then give the cause to the other possible beings. That is what my father was talking about.
Well, that's why, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his reality and that original reality is the same as the light of the Imams as well, or the reality of the Imams as well, or the Ma'sumin, because Az-Zahra alayhi salam is also included. That's why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is said to be نقطة دائرة الوجود ومحيطها, the center and circumference of the circle of being, of the circle of existence. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين.